Hi there. So my name's Stuart Main. I'm a designer at Well Played Games, one of the studios in Leamington Spa. And I've been in the industry for about 24 years now. Obviously, a lot has changed over that time, but one of the things that hasn't changed is the importance of kind of your CV and your portfolio to get you seen when you're applying for a job. So hopefully this session will help with that. So I'm just going to introduce you to the people that are involved, and each one of them, if you could just run through what you do and your studio, that would be great. Start with Guy.
Thank you, Stuart. Hi, everybody. My name's Guy DeRosa. I'm the head of talent of two game studios. One's called Electric Square and one's called Studio Gobo, both based down in Brighton and Hove in the UK. Electric Square actually has a brand spanking new Leamington Spa studio and another new studio over in Singapore, which again, we've just opened. So we tried to open two studios during the pandemic, which was, had its own challenges. We are co-development studios, sort of work for hire as well. So we've been working on the likes of Hogwarts Legacy that you may have seen recently announced, Forza Street, Hot Wheels ID, and quite a few more. Assassin's Creed VR has just been announced as well. I'm just trying to think what's been announced. Yeah, nice to meet you all.
Cool. Saya?
Hi, my name is Saya. I'm a senior environment artist at Rebellion.
Cool. Sam?
Hi, my name is Sam Ivel. I'm a junior engine programmer at Ubisoft in Leamington. Been in the industry for about 21 months now. Spent the first 10 months working as a gameplay programmer on The Division 2, and more recently, the previous 11 months working as an engine programmer on an unannounced project.
Okay, and finally, Sol?
Hey, I'm Sol. I'm talent acquisition specialist at Sega Hardlight. We're known for our Sonic IPs, they're all mobile, and then we've got a few party projects that we've just done. We're also here based in Leamington Spa, and we've got a few more things that we've got.
Cool. So I'm just going to put some questions to these guys, things that I would like to have known when I was starting out, and then if you submit your questions, we'll run through those at the end of the session. Okay, so let's just kick off then. So start with you, Guy, then. So when people are submitting a portfolio, particularly art, do you recommend that they tailor that to your kind of studio's style, the games that you've made, the art styles that you tend to work with, or should they keep it sort of broad and generic and then just show everything they've got, basically?
Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. And I think that might be quite an open topic among everybody here, because for ourselves, I would say no. I would say your portfolio is your portfolio, and given that we're a co-development or, multi-project studio, I should say, we cover an array of different things. So mobile racing games up to, as I say, Assassin's Creed we're working on at the moment. So we quite like to see a really good, tight, broad skill set available when we're looking through portfolios, and that kind of versatility for ourselves. I understand that other studios, they have a kind of a more kind of, I guess, narrow idea of what it is that they're going to be working on, and that's completely understandable. I think that it's really important though in terms of kind of researching the games before you actually apply to somebody. I think that's super important to demonstrate that you've done that. But maybe you can establish that in like a cover letter. I would like to work for you because I admire this. These are the skills that I have. And if you look at this on my portfolio, it might indicate that I would be really good to contribute to the stuff that you're working on.
Cool, thanks. Anybody else got any opinion on that topic? No? All right. So yeah, obviously, when you're starting out in the industry, there are a lot of applicants for any given role because, as you've been working for longer, you get more kind of specialized, and it's easy to kind of apply for the roles that you're good at. But at the start then, so if we go for you, Saya, do you have any advice for people that are coming into the industry in terms of how to make their CV stand out or their portfolio, things that they should definitely do or not do?
Yes, yes, I have lots of opinions on this. Of course, for an artist, it's the portfolio that is the most important thing. They won't even care what your name is. They will look at the portfolio first. find out who you are after if it's good enough. I think the first thing that comes to mind is don't make a sci-fi corridor unless you're certain that you are the best at making sci-fi corridors, because everyone's doing them. And at the end of the day, they all kind of tend to blend together because there's only so many camera angles and so many themes and colors you can put in it. But of course, if you really, really love making sci-fi corridors, and that kind of suits the style that the studio is working on, then do something original with it. Like maybe it's crash landed, maybe it's half submerged in water, or maybe it was designed by and for sloths, like something that doesn't have human engineering needs, something that makes it people remember, like, oh, it was a sci-fi corridor, but it was different. Another one that was just mentioned to me was recreations of Angkor Wat, that they're very popular, they're very beautiful, but if everyone's making them, there's no need to make yourself compete even more. These could be industry professionals, and if they have the same scene as you, it's going to be difficult. So if you can add some kind of visual storytelling into it, like something happened in this environment, so it's not just clean, brand new things, that helps as well. Then, of course, I am talking to as like a photorealistic environment artist, that having actual environment in your portfolio, if that's what you want to do, is quite important. Like if you want to do characters, then don't feel that you need to include an environment in there, and the other way around. That as a student, I often felt like I need to add something more, like, oh, I should be making guns, but I hate making guns, and I don't want to make guns for a living. So it's a good thing I didn't have those in my portfolio. And that's that caused completely unnecessary stress. You don't have to be good at absolutely everything. Just do the thing that you love the most. Then small little details, like don't render your assets on a black background, because then we can't see the silhouette, and then it's like, are you hiding something? Is there a reason why it's black? Another really important one is about materials, that if you made something really amazing, really beautiful material, but you're only displaying it in that little substance ball, it's not worth anything. Because if you don't know what is it made for, and does it actually work in the engine, what does it look like when it's applied to something, we get suspicious and we think it probably doesn't work unless you're showing it. And then there's the basic things for a 3D artist that you do have to show. You can do high sculpts, that you can bake them down to a low poly. You have sensible poly counts, logical UV layout. You don't have to do it for everything, but just show those ones over one asset. And then we know, like, okay, you understand how things work. And the most important thing, I guess, what you are looking for in portfolio is, are you an artist who can tell when something looks good or when it doesn't? And one way to tell is, have they included a lot of bad work? That have they included every single piece they've ever made? And then the fear is, do they actually know that some of this work is not as good as the other things? Because that's kind of a big part of the job, that you have to be able to judge how to improve on something. So just include the bits that you're really proud of. And finally, just the simple things, like don't make it difficult for people to see your work. It should be the first thing when they click on your portfolio, just immediately see your best work. And don't make them sit through videos to find out what you did, because nobody has time for that. There you go.
Great, that's good advice, thank you. Anybody got any from the other disciplines, any sort of differences or additions?
I guess just sort of adding on, because that was sort of very artist focused. I think it's important to do a similar thing, but from a programming mindset too. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, your portfolio isn't just an art specific thing, right? It should be used as well for, certainly I think the standout thing in any portfolio will be work you've done in your spare time. Like, I think at the end of the day, it's really nice if you have a portfolio of good university work, but the thing that really is important to me in a portfolio is, across all disciplines, is, okay, this is great, but did you do it in your spare time? Because unfortunately, the harsh reality of the games industry is that it's super competitive, and you're really looking for any edge you can possibly get. And that kind of, if you're the kind of person who works on things in your spare time, that tells a lot about your personality type, and that you're someone who is curious and always looking into developing new things. And that's something we really look for in the industry. So I guess the takeaway point there is, the portfolio isn't just really an art specific thing. Same with design as well, right? Your portfolio should be, it really is your chance at uniqueness across any discipline. So yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I agree. And just on a personal note, as a designer, yeah, my one piece of advice is if you do a project, finish it. Because I don't want to look at a portfolio when it's got endless, I didn't finish this, I gave up on this, I didn't finish. Like, pick a small thing and finish it. It's just, yeah, a personal bugbear on portfolios. Okay, cool. So yeah, if we jump to Sam again, then. So what sort of process would people go through in an interview at your studio? I mean, is there a test involved, and who would they be expected to meet? It just might help people to understand what the sort of process will be.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So I'll probably approach this one sort of from a multidisciplinary perspective, because it will be different depending on whether you're applying to us as a programmer or as an artist. But I think the first stage for any sort of interview or for any sort of process will be that all CVs will go through a filtering. So this will be the same regardless of the role you apply for us for, and this will just sort of be to reject at first base, all the candidates who don't really have any relevant skills or formal education in the discipline they're applying for. But I mean, if you've done a degree in, if you want to go into, again, say programming, and you've done a computer science degree at university and you're applying to us as a programmer, like, you will make it through this stage, right? But that's just sort of the initial thing. Like, we do that on all applications. And then this is kind of where it diverges a bit. So I'll probably take programming first, because that is our most complex process, I think, all things considered. So yeah, so assuming you've got through that first stage, we then send out like an initial screener test. So it's just a multiple choice test. It's an hour long. And this will really test you on your kind of your core knowledge. So there'll be, questions in there about C++ and, like memory management and design pattern. Well, that's not C++ specific, but general sort of core knowledge-y stuff that tests your formal background. And this is a really important stage, actually, because this is the stage that we actually reject most of our candidates, like the bulk of the candidates applying. So, and the way we'll do that is we'll just have like a particular cutoff percentage, which I'm pretty sure is variable depending on the caliber of candidate we had that year. And it's like, oh, we'll take the top X, and that means that anyone below this gets rejected, unfortunately. But the good news is, if you get through that stage, then you're guaranteed an interview with us, but not before you do another test that we send out, which I guess, with this being a university student session, like, I guess the easiest way to explain this is it's kind of like a mini coursework. So like, it's got a 2-week deadline, and we expect you to spend about 5 hours on it, because we know you're probably very busy, right? Especially as a final year student, you probably have a dissertation and stuff to crack on with. So we don't want to take too much of your time. Like, you can spend longer than that if you want, but the key thing here is we'll send you out a piece of software. It's just like a small 2D game. It's nothing crazy, and we expect you to make improvements to it. And we don't tell you what those improvements are, because that's part of the assessment itself, right? But yeah, like, so you'll want to document all the changes you've made and then send it back to us. And then when you get called for the final interview, which, if the world was normal, it would be an in-person interview, but these days it'll be a remote interview. We'll sort of harken back to those 2 prior assessment kind of sections, right? We'll ask you, oh, on this multiple choice question, you chose this instead of this. Like, why was that? Like, what was your thinking behind that? Or like, oh, in the little coursework thing we gave you, you decided to improve this or upgrade this, even though it was already fully functional. Like, why did you do that? Or like, why didn't you do that sometimes? But yeah, like, the interview is a fairly like standard process, I think, across most studios. The way we do it is it's a split of usually 2 to 3 people who will be seniors or leads. But we don't want that to intimidate you. Like, we are there to like help you and reassure you. Like, we will work with you and sort of try to steer you in the right direction, as long as you're willing to work with us. So, and then hopefully, you'll go through the final interview, and then we give feedback, in sort of 2 to 3 weeks, usually. And then, so I guess the next discipline is design, which is a bit simpler, right? We don't have that multiple choice test that we do in programming, but we do still have this kind of, imagine it as like a mini coursework. And again, I'll keep it abstract, but the way that generally works is we'll send out like a design brief, and it will be like, oh, you're a game designer on project X, and the game director has come to you to implement a feature. And we kind of leave it quite open-ended usually on like what that feature is, because obviously that is part of the design in and of itself. It's like, are you going to design, maybe it's some kind of skill or some kind of like weapon or something. And essentially the point of this assessment is to get you to sell us on the particular feature. But we leave it completely open-ended, right? Obviously we're expecting you to evaluate, the pros and cons of the thing that you're making, and how it would fit into the greater scope of the game. Like, obviously you don't want to develop something that's too overpowered or doesn't really fit with the rest of the setting or whatever. because we also leave it open-ended as well in terms of how you present that information to us. Like, it's like, oh, you have this design document. How do you want to go about conveying that to us? So again, that's pretty important. And then you'll go through to the final interview again. And very similar like vein of questions as it is in the programming. It will kind of be trying to understand your thought process and like, oh, you know, you made the decision to do this. Why? You know, like in the infinite like problem space you chose to do this one thing. Like, why did you choose this over another thing? And you know, if you had more time, could you embellish it a little bit? So we really are just trying to help you. We're trying to understand the way you think in a way that is as true to life, as true to a day-to-day for us as possible. And again, you know, you'll sort of get the feedback and hopefully a job offer. But then probably the simplest process-wise for us is the art stream, which is, yeah, you apply, and this is very portfolio-based, right? So this is, you'll apply, there is no kind of testing, coursework kind of thing. It's just kind of the leads will sit down with all the portfolios and they will just sort of handpick the best ones. And, you know, you will be invited to the interview. And again, you know, very similar questions. You know, they will ask like, oh, you could have done anything. You know, why did you decide to do this? And yeah, so it really is just trying to understand why the candidate thinks the way that they do when they could have done almost anything. But yeah, I think I've covered just about everything there. But if anyone has any questions about that, then there's a Q&A at the end.
Cool. Okay. Detailed. Does anybody else have any kind of opinions on that area?
Yeah, I would just second the way that you present yourself. I think that was a really good point that Sam just made. We do a very, very similar thing. A lot of our kind of assessments that are sent out are open to your interpretation. You know, people often ask how we would prefer the delivery, how we'd prefer to receive that. And the message is always, you know, it's up to you. You tell us how you'd prefer to present yourself. We often, but sometimes we do see people let themselves down, not in the content of their work or the intelligence or the creativity behind it, but in the presentation of their work. So yeah, it gets a +1 from me on that.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so just continuing that area, just for one more question. And so, so Sol, have you got any kind of just like really low level sort of advice, basic advice for attending an interview, you know, in terms of what do people wear? Should they turn up early? Should they bring anything? Just that very kind of fundamental sort of stuff.
I mean, right now we're doing it all on Teams and stuff. So you usually get a link to join on a call or Skype, whatever it is. I definitely recommend making sure that the day before, you know, it all works. You don't want to like get 5 minutes or just before your interview and say, I haven't got a link or anything, or something isn't working. Make sure you can eliminate that problem right from the start. In terms of what you can wear, I mean, the industry is super laid back. You're never going to see anyone in a suit unless they go into an award ceremony. So, you know, smart top jeans, I think is fine. You know, don't come in, I don't know, in Sunday League's finest in a football kit or anything like that. In terms of, you know, tips maybe of what to bring in and stuff, a bottle of water, just in case for some reason you're not offered water on site, a pack of chewing gum, just in case you've had a coffee on the way, and a tip for like nerves and stuff. A big thing that helped me when I like just left uni, or looking at jobs and stuff, like I'm quite fidgety. Taking a bit of blue tack just to have under the table to mess about with just calmed my nerves quite a lot, so it's quite a good thing to do. It's not going to make a lot of sound either. It's not like a tapping of a pen or anything like that, and no one's really going to see it. In terms of anything else you can take, I mean, they're going to have your CV and portfolio. If you've got something maybe that you've finished that isn't, you know, available online or whatever, maybe take it on a USB. But apart from that, I don't think there's anything else. In terms of arriving on time, I'd probably say don't try to arrive like anything more than 15 minutes early. If you sat in a room, you know, for half an hour, it puts pressure on the people that are going to interview you. You know, they're feeling in a rush. These people are busy. If they're in the middle of something and feel rushed, you know, it's just they're going to be going back to it thinking they've done something wrong. So, you know, I wouldn't arrive anywhere more than 15 minutes. Say that's my advice on any of that.
Cool, yeah, that makes sense. Anybody else got any extra tips or anything?
Yeah, I do. I really loved all of those tips, and again, I would second the lot. Particularly when it comes to fidgeting. I mean, I probably seem as though I'm confident on a call like this right now, but under the screen, I've got a little spinner ring that's constantly on the go. You know, so yeah, I completely second that, and I think the people in the games industry, you know, we all have our quirks, and that's totally cool. I just wanted to sort of add a little interview tip that I don't think gets enough coverage, and it's regarding the preparation. Knowing who you're talking to before you're talking to them. A good recruiter should send you a list of the people that you would expect to meet during that call at the moment or interview process. And, you know, LinkedIn is accessible to all of us. It's a free platform to go and check out who you're talking to. Now, I would always suggest that you come prepared with questions. Let's say about 7 questions, for example. Bring them in on a physical list, you know, so even if they do get covered during the call, you can sort of physically say, oh, you've covered everything, that's fine, rather than doing the classic, no, I think you've covered everything. You know, we all see through that. We've all done it ourselves. So have the physical list, but my main thing is know who you're talking to and prepare a couple of questions for them. You know, as individuals. I noticed that you used to work at PlayStation. You know, what made you jump over to Electric Square, for example? I promise you, they will appreciate that, you know. And we talk about first impressions, but it's really important to leave a good last impression, you know. And when you ask somebody about themselves, let's face it, it's everybody's favorite subject in the world is themselves. It's the one that they know the most about. It releases dopamine or something, you know. So the last memory that person will have of you is when you were asking them about themselves and, you know, making them feel great, basically. So yeah, just wanted to add that on the end. That's my top pro tip for interviewing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, cool. So yeah, we'll stay with you then, guys. So let's go back to portfolios and people presumably hosting them on websites and stuff like that. So have you got any advice for setting those up? Like things that you see on people's portfolios or sites that you just think is a mistake or that they should do more of?
Yeah, you know, I have to admit, I think that between the crew here, we've kind of covered a lot of this on this call, and that's excellent. To find that my peers at other studios are, you know, finding the same challenges as myself as well. You know, it's a lot of consistent messages here. I would definitely echo the thought that, you know, if you're leaving bad stuff on your portfolio, then you're going to be judged on it, for want of a better word or term. You know, it means that you might have bad taste, and if you're an artist, you can't have bad taste. You know, even if it was something that you did in university a few years ago and you didn't quite get to finish it and everything, but it's something that you did, and you're trying to pad out your portfolio. Don't do that. Don't ever pad out your portfolio. If there's work that you're not proud of, then don't show us it. You know, I would definitely say take that off. I think that VFX recently, Reels, the presentation of those, you know, again, take off the work that you're not so proud of, even if it means you leave yourself with very little, a handful of bits and pieces. That's cool. It means you can talk confidently about those, you know, when you get to an interview. And please make sure that just the presentation, you know, the way that the video evolves and kind of delivers your work looks good. It's enjoyable to watch. It runs fluid. I make sure I know what I'm looking at. Remember, not everybody that looks at your reel or your portfolio indeed is going to be a VFX artist or an artist or basically your discipline peer. Remember that you've got to get past this sort of layer of perhaps recruitment staff first, and they maybe didn't go to university and won't immediately understand the things that you understand, and the art director will understand, you know. So you've got to, in some ways, spoon feed the recruitment team, you know, in order to get to the art team. And I think that that's good to be mindful of while you're putting your portfolios and reels together.
Cool, that's great. Yeah. Anybody else on that area?
Yeah, I think guys pretty much covered it there. I think the main thing you should be thinking about is quality over quantity. And I get the whole thing about work in progress things. If you've got lots of stuff that aren't finished and then suddenly you've got a lot of stuff that are more recently finished, people can read into that and think, you know, you're just quitting things halfway through, or you came against something you couldn't, you know, overcome, and you just left it. Yeah, I'd probably say these are the things you need to take off and just consider when you do anything on your ArtStation, your own website, or anything like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Absolutely. Okay. So just on the same topic then. So Saya, when people are putting art on their sites, do you recommend they just present it as is so that it speaks for itself, or should they give you context and try and explain why they did it or what it is and that sort of stuff?
Well, there are situations where you absolutely have to add context. So if you use someone else's concept art or done anything that's based on someone else's art, then yes, you absolutely have to mention that. I have seen portfolios with a very similar robot popping up, multiple different people. Not a single one of them said where it came from, but it got very suspicious until I spoke to one of them and they said, well, it is my own work, but it is based on someone else's concept. So without this information, and if you happen to see something that you've seen before, it makes you very suspicious that either you have stolen it, or they will assume you came up with it, which might be even worse, because then you're going to get a job doing something you don't know how to do. So that's why I would just personally kind of avoid working from concept art. Of course, sometimes in the job you have to, and sometimes it's good to show that you can follow it. But also it's the same thing as with the corridors, like it's not completely your own. You haven't invented something new. If the whole core of your work is based on a concept that only works because someone else came up with it, then that's a bit of a problem. And it's easier to be really good and really unique at something no one else has ever tried before. So you are not going to be the best at it if other people have used the same concept before. And also the same thing with group project, which do of course happen in universities. Those are really hard to judge because it just says this was a group work and then there's a beautiful screenshot and you have no idea, did they do the lighting? Did they do all the assets? Did they do coordination? Did they actually, what did they have to do with this? So in there, like just physically draw a picture like a circle, I made this bit, or only show the parts that you made and then specify that this was a group project. So anything in this picture is not my work. And I have sometimes had those where it's such a beautiful work, but it's a terrible detective job to try to find out which one of these people was responsible for which. Nobody who is doing this kind of stuff for a living has actual time for that. But then there are the other situations where it is completely your own work. And yeah, it's interesting if you have something interesting to say about it. But if you just say, well, I wanted to make flowers, so I made a flower, I mean, it doesn't hurt at all, but it's not, it doesn't add anything relevant to it. And really, but by the end of the day, how it looks is the most important thing. That as long as it looks beautiful, how you went there, as long as you didn't copy anyone else's work, it's not, it's just padding. You don't necessarily need it. And another thing also that people tend to show really beautiful materials and they're set up in Substance Designer, which again means absolutely nothing if the end result isn't beautiful. You don't have to show any of that hard work that has gone into it. It's the end result that we care about.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Is that true for programming or any other disciplines, or?
Yes, absolutely. Like, you know, if you can talk about the work on your portfolio, I mean, straight away, like if you're not talking about your work on your portfolio, you could probably expect to be questioned on it in your interview anyway. You know, as a sort of proof that you've done the work anyway. Like, if you can talk about the work in detail, then it's a good proof that you have done it, right? Like, I think it's one of the biggest problems of working in sort of a digital space. Like, I guess this applies across programming and art, is that it's really easy to just copy work and steal it, right? And you kind of have to, the only way you can kind of guarantee that hasn't been the case is, like I said, you know, either explaining it yourself or being able to defend it when someone asks you questions on it. So yeah, any kind of detail you can give is always good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks. So if we stay with you then, Sam. So just to kind of the final sort of area, obviously companies advertise for roles, but would you recommend that people approach companies that aren't advertising? And is there a specific way of doing that, you know, or definitely should not do it, you know, that sort of stuff?
Yeah, I would say absolutely 100%, but you have to make sure that you do it in a sensible and considerate way. So I think some companies, even if they're not actively hiring for your discipline, you know, if you go to their job site, they may have some kind of open role, you know, like unsolicited applications or speculative applications, and straight away that's a good sign, right? That's like a catch-all. You can just put it there. If they don't have that, but they do have some kind of public email address, then absolutely, I would say there is no harm in sending them a speculative application. But like once you're kind of into that territory, like you have to, this is where, you know, say it has, you have to be considerate in that, you know, you are kind of applying speculatively at that point. Like if you don't get a reply back, you know, that's to be expected. So please don't like spam the same company like multiple times, because that will have a negative effect likely on your application if you were to apply again in the future. But failing that, right, you know, if it's sort of a small outfit, you know, they maybe don't have a fully fledged website, then LinkedIn is a great place too. Like, you know, if you can find any member of the recruitment team for the studio you want to work at and connect with them on LinkedIn, that's awesome, you know, and just send them a message. Like the worst case scenario you'll have from that is, you know, you don't hear back from them and you've now got a new connection on LinkedIn, you know, which could hopefully lead you to other things. Also, I would recommend, and this is maybe more art specific, but ArtStation as well is great. Like I think you should be using ArtStation as your sort of portfolio hosting place anyway. Like that's brilliant. Like if you're an art student and don't have an ArtStation, then go sign up for one after this talk, because a lot of the professional artists I know do, and it's a great way to host your stuff. But yeah, like and just being in communities, I think as well is important. Like, you know, if you hang around in certain developer like Discords or any kind of forums, you know, it's just nice to speak to people, and you know, just by putting yourself in that like opportunity space, like you'd be amazed of well, yeah, the new opportunities that open up to you, you know, that maybe a studio isn't hiring on their website, but maybe, you know, a role has just opened up internally, and because you know the right person, you know, they've got you on their mind straight away, so they come to you, right? I mean, obviously they'd still have to advertise the job, but you know, straight away from the get-go, you are still, you know, a strong candidate in their eyes.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, okay, and then just on that kind of area, then just to finish, so Sol, if you've got any advice on just on chasing these things up, basically, if you apply and you don't hear, how long should you wait, or you know, how keen should you be versus how quickly do you annoy people? Do you know? I mean, just that general topic.
Yeah, well, I guess it depends on like which stage you're at and stuff. So if you just apply, I'd probably give it like 2 weeks. Usually everyone has like an ATS to be able to attract people, and they should get an automatic email or, you know, saying someone's going to be in touch, and then they should get one when they're rejected. If you haven't got one, I'd probably say like after 2 weeks, you could probably drop one of the message, preferably through LinkedIn if you find a recruiter. If you're in the stage where you're interviewing and stuff, at the end of your interview, always ask how long is it going to take to the next bit. And then, you know, if they say, oh, we've got a lot of people off on holiday or whatever, it'll be 2 weeks. Wait till you get to the 2 week mark and then drop them a message. If you haven't heard anything, you know, if you didn't ask, I'd probably say wait a week at most. If, you know, they've not said anything. But, you know, I think what you need to be careful of is not seeming, you know, pushy or almost entitled in the fact, you know, you need to be polite. You know, we're all people in the end of the day. We could have anything going on. Some of us might be on holiday or whatever, and that's why you're not getting a message. If someone comes back to their emails after a 2 week holiday and they have 10 of them from the same people, just with the same email constantly, it's just a bit too much. And yeah, I mean, all this gets fed to the hiring managers as well. So if they think that, you know, you're a bit of a nuisance, you're going to be a pain, it could be detrimental to, you know, your application. So yeah, you know, definitely ask and talk and, you know, do that follow up as well. If, let's say, you've had interviews and then you never hear anything back after you've messaged, you know, after 2 weeks, and then after a week they haven't got back to you, it's probably not a place that you want to be. The only reason it's going to be like that is, you know, something major's gone on, someone's left or on holiday or whatever, but you should hear something back at some point. If you don't hear anything back, yeah, it's not a place I think that's going to take care of you.
Yeah, interesting perspective. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, and then just one question that just occurred, I guess, Guy, do you recommend that people use recruiters, as in the agencies that are out there, or should they avoid that and just apply directly? Well, anybody who's got an opinion on that, but just a interesting area.
Yeah, totally. I think that, I mean, I came from an agency myself, for example. I was at an agency for years. I know Sol was, for example, that was how we met. And we've both gone internal. I think that it definitely gave me my kind of my tutorship, you know, into the games industry. And a lot of people that I worked with in an agency, they really knew what they were talking about, and they were super passionate and whatnot. I think it's just about working with the right ones, you know, somebody that knows what you do for a living. You can utilize LinkedIn for this. You can see how long they've been in recruitment, how long have they been in the games industry, are they a specialist in the vertical market that you work in, for example. So if you're an artist, I would suggest that you work with a recruiter that specializes in artists. You know, they will be able to not just spot what you're good at, but they'll be able to sell what you're good at when they're talking to their clients in the various studios. And sometimes, you know, we could have, admittedly, we could have 100 applications for a junior artist role, but I might get a call from one of my agencies that I known and trusted and I'm friendly with, and they'll say, listen, Guy, you have to look at this CV. And sometimes your CV or your portfolio is at the top of my pile because your agent's done such a great job of putting it under my nose, you know, and making it impossible to ignore. So yeah, I would say so. Just definitely just make sure that you're working with someone that's been around for a while and knows what they're doing.
Sorry, technical there. Computers will never catch on. Cool. So we've got some questions from the audience. So I'll try and cover some of them. So yeah, was an interesting one about, obviously we've talked about code, design and art, but has anybody got any comments on sort of production? Because obviously there's a whole raft of roles that are involved in a studio these days, but production, yeah, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, I can speak about that. I think that what we're finding is that people coming from outside of the games industry in the production line, you know, you're probably going to find it an easier transition than other people within other disciplines coming from outside of the industry in. Your skill set is probably transferable. You know, if you worked in TV, film, digital media, for example, the core skills, you know, it's about people, organization, philosophy. It's a lot of it's going to be the same stuff. Obviously, the compliances are different because you can, let's say that you were part of the production team that was looking to build a space shuttle. You can't crash one of those, but you can crash an Xbox. So, you know, there are some differences there, but they're happy differences. And that means that in the games industry, where the production line is more about keeping the smile on people's faces, let's say within the team. If you're starting out, I would definitely look into learning about agile methodologies and frameworks, become a Scrum Master. You know, this is like a 3-day course. We all seem to have a bit more time on our hands, something that you can take sitting in your living room, and something that's kind of demonstrable on your CV, that you understand some of the core skills and duties that you need as a producer in the games industry. We interviewed somebody last week that was brilliant, and she was sort of explaining that while she doesn't know anything about Agile commercially or Jira commercially, she's been listening to podcasts about them, you know, and just that alone just shows us that this person knows why they want to be in the games industry, and they're keen to learn the fundamentals about kind of making that transition. So yeah, there's a lot you can do.
Yeah, it makes sense. I guess the kind of fundamentals of what we've been talking about, of presenting yourself and being prepared, all that applies across any role effectively. Like, you're likely to get a test of some sort and this sort of thing. That makes sense. So another question then, is it worth showing previous work to show how you've improved, or should you only show the best stuff that you've got? I think we kind of talked about that, to be honest, but.
Well, for artists, I would say it makes a really interesting talking point, as long as you have something to talk about. But if it is this is a drawing I made 5 years ago and this is a new one, it will show improvement, but it's not interesting. So if it is like, well, I made this artwork and then I realized it would have been better if I knew how to use Substance. So I learned Substance and now look at it now. Like if there is something, some kind of technical reason, something that you can basically present, like I encountered a problem and this is how I solved it, right? That makes you really, really interesting. That's excellent advertisement for you as a personality. But not if it's just generic, look, I have gotten better in time. It's nice, but it's not really worth it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's a good point that, yeah, you're trying to present the context, I guess. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So someone is talking about, they've got very broad sort of areas they're involved in, lots of different editing and websites and artwork, programming, all sorts of areas. So like what sort of role should they apply to?
So for this one, I would probably say if they still want to use all of those skills, they're probably going to have much more success applying for sort of an indie position, generally because their teams are much smaller. Each member of the team will wear a lot more hats, right? They'll end up doing a bit more of everything. Whereas certainly at the AAA level, you know, with bigger projects, bigger budgets, like we tend to be a lot more specialized. So I think the thing to say there is like, if they have a certain affinity for any one of those things, like, you know, you mentioned programming, like if they say, oh, I'd be happy just to specialize in programming, then go ahead and do that, and probably do that at AAA, right? If you want to be specialized. I mean, indie studios, you know, allow you to specialize as well. But I'm just saying it's, you know, you won't really see generalists on, well, you don't see generalists across multiple disciplines in AAA really at all. So if you still want to sort of, you know, tick off all those boxes and do a bit of art, bit of programming, then an indie outfit would probably be more for you, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of T-shaped people effectively. Yeah. So, yeah, because they can't afford to have all those people hanging around. So yeah, they need people that can get stuck in. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, and then yeah, so I guess this question for you, Sai, of what sort of questions are likely to be asked to artists at job interviews?
I think I was maybe asked something along the lines of like, what did you like when you were doing this project? That they would have my portfolio up and I just talk them through the work. And what was really difficult in here, which is again, it's the same trick that they want to know, did you encounter a problem? Because everyone does, but how did you resolve it? Because if the situation is like, well, I had very limited time, so I decided to then prioritize this, this, and this asset, then that's fine. Then it's not a problem that you had limited time. It's a matter of how did you solve it. Also, like, what are you most proud of? Because that's, then again, they're trying to see what can you tell when something looks good or not. So they will just ask you to talk about your work, and it matters how do you talk about it. Are you excited or are you kind of embarrassed? So only show things that you want to talk about and that you're proud to talk about. It's been many years since I had my interview, but I think that was the one that felt like that's the most challenging question, is what did you struggle with and how did you solve it? So it's good to think of that before you go into an interview, because it makes for an excellent talking point.
Cool. And I guess we covered the other disciplines. Any other kind of comments on respective areas, that specific questions that you might get?
So I guess I probably just do want to add to what I just said, not to like dissuade anyone, but when I was saying like there's no generalist across multiple disciplines, like we do kind of have hybrid roles almost. So if you were to imagine that there's a role called tech art, for example, like technical art, which is a good hybrid. For example, if you are interested in, say, the more artistic side of things and programming, it's kind of like you become a jack of all trades in those things. So to that person who asked that question a few minutes ago, like if you don't have to, like, if you still want to work in AAA, you don't have to just pick one thing. Like we do now have these sort of hybrid roles. So that may be something to look into. I just didn't want to send off sort of the wrong message that you have to like specialize in just one thing. We do kind of have these things that blur the lines a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. And just personal level, one of the things I notice when people are coming into the industry and they don't have a lot of experience to talk about in their sort of CV or portfolio, the personal projects, the things we talked about earlier, I think is the kind of the key, the kind of, what do you do outside of work? What are your interests? That sort of stuff. Hopefully that makes sense to people.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I mean, certainly on my portfolio, like I think I only had a couple of pieces from my actual university work, and even then they were the more sort of interesting abstract ones, like that would stand me out as a candidate, right? I had like a VR project I worked on, and I think even like an AR project, because obviously not many students would have the chance to work with that kind of technology. But yeah, certainly most of my portfolio was stuff I did in my spare time. Again, because it does highlight, you know, if you are the kind of person to do that kind of thing in your spare time, it shows that you're passionate, it shows that you're curious, and you're constantly wanting to improve your skills. And it's just, it's probably not a necessity, but it definitely is a massive advantage in the highly competitive landscape that is the games industry. Because I can promise you, like, it really is only this competitive at the junior level. Like the games industry as a whole, when you start getting to this more senior levels, is actually quite talent starved. So it really is just, you have to get it right just this once and really try and make yourself, you know, candidate number one just this once, put the effort in, and then once you're in, it becomes so easy to just move around. You know, and like I said, it might not make sense to you as a student, but like when you get towards the more senior roles, like or even like once you're in at a junior or a respectable company, you know, you will have people coming after you, you know, wanting to hire you all the time. But certainly at those senior roles, it's just massively talent starved. So just get it right just this once.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, well, thanks for everybody. I think we're out of time. So thank you all for your time and your input, and hopefully that was some useful advice for people.